you.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to our studio,
Good morning.
Ilya.
Happy to be here.
Okay, so
Yes.
since
Well,
my colleague...
before we talk about Ringkas.
Okay, Paul, please tell me your story.
Yeah, I'll share my experience just a little bit. We looked to purchase a home back early at the start of the year. It's been almost a year. The home is almost complete, and that's when about a month ago we had to start processing the mortgage. And let me tell you, I've forgotten how much of legwork you have to do when you have to apply for a mortgage, the process of approval, all the paperwork you have to submit, and not only that. The process itself, getting everyone together, the developer, the bank, the notaris or the lawyer, and us, and all in the same room all at one time, was a bit of a difficult process. But before we get into Ringkas, could you tell us, Ilya, about the current state of home lending in Indonesia? We are now coming out of a pandemic. What is it like right now, the situation?
Yeah, for sure. I think just a few data points just to put it out there. I think if we're talking about mortgages and home ownership in Indonesia, currently, the major challenge is around financing, the affordability, obviously, for customers. And if we look at some numbers in Indonesia, mortgage penetration to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world.
Really?
It's actually below 3%.
Okay.
So if we compare it to some other more developed markets, like US is around 50%.
Right.
But even countries like Malaysia is around 38%. So Indonesia is still fairly low.
Okay. Is this because it's difficult, like the parameters here in Indonesia, it's a lot more difficult to get approved, or are people just not realistically going for the right homes that they can get approved for? What's the reason behind it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of it is around relies around education, right, and understanding the mortgage as a product. It's a fairly complex product. You have interest rate, you have fixed rate, you have a variable rate.
So many things.
So many things, right? So sometimes consumers are just overwhelmed and they don't fully understand and they're not fully prepared in how to face that process, right? So I think preparation is key in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of people compare, they think lending is lending. It's like a credit card or a small loan, but it's completely different, right? Because you have collateral, you have the varying interest rates, the floating rate, the fixed rate, and not only that, one has to understand that when you borrow for a property, you're actually, the amount of interest versus the amount of capital you pay from the beginning all the way to the end changes over time as well. And that has to be taken into consideration, paying out early and penalties and things of that sort, right?
Yeah, specifically, if you remember, Paul, that the government is encourage young generation to have their own house.
Of course.
Through the mortgage and everything. So does Indonesia have home loan options?
Like so the government has been really pushing towards, said, the first home buyers. So currently in Indonesia, there is a big backlog of home ownership. It's estimated to be around 14 million, the latest data. So meaning there's 14 million households who are supposed to have a house and they don't.
Wow.
So there's been a big push from the government in a called a subsidy program called FLPP, where they're trying to really subsidize and help people to get their first house. And then usually we're talking in these cases of quite affordable housing, so it's below 200 million.
Okay. What sort of subsidy? Are we talking like subsidized interest rates? Or?
Yes, correct. It's a fixed 5% interest rate.
Oh, okay.
All right. So let's talk some numbers then. Okay. So some say that if you purchase a home, let's say up to 1 billion rupiahs, you would end up paying almost half of that in interest rate alone. Some home buyers might prefer to save their money and pay in cash, but then you have to save for so long. What are the drawbacks when you buy a home in cash? I mean, obviously, apart from having to save up that much money, and why is it more beneficial to get a mortgage?
I think it's the mindset. Obviously, in Indonesia, a lot of people are getting married fairly early.
Yes.
And once you get married, you want to have your own house. And I think a house is actually a very emotional purchase, probably the most emotional purchase. And I think if I compare it to, for example, Europe, where I grew up, usually people start saving for the house very early on, right? So the early on they save, they can apply for a mortgage and they have enough down payment. And then once they get married, they can enjoy living immediately in their own house and gradually repaying their mortgage.
Right.
So I think the fact of having a better quality of life immediately and being able to live in your own house with your own family.
Yeah,
I think
that's the ideal.
That's very, very precious to many people, and that's why I think. Obviously, with interest rate, you end up paying a little bit more over the time, but you enjoy that time living in your own house. So
Yeah, and especially it's a very Asian thing to start your family almost immediately.
Yes.
Get married, get a home, you want to have kids right away.
Wow, that's so much pressure.
Yeah, I'm
And
testament to that.
Exactly, and when you face the reality, oh my God, it's so hard.
yes.
So people tend to back up. So what do we need to prepare before making the decision to purchase our own home? And what do we need to avoid?
So I think preparation is key. I think first of all you need to understand your own capacity, right? So I think many people don't understand what they can afford,
Okay.
right? So I think that is the first step, right? Can I afford a billion rupiah house? Can I afford a 2 billion rupiah house, right? What I'm gonna get approved for? What documents do I need to prepare to get approved for? So I think those are the basic things that sometimes people, don't think about. So they say, okay, I want to apply for a mortgage for this house, but then they realize that actually they don't have enough income.
Right.
Or they have some previous obligations in terms of, buy now, pay later loans that are
Yes.
very common, or they maybe had a loan for a car. So then the bank don't approve them and they get rejected.
Yeah.
And then that's where the frustration starts. So I think the key is really preparation, understanding your capacity, understanding how the process looks like, and have a bit of a transparency in that whole end-to-end journey, right?
Yeah, and I can agree with that as well. I can relate because, like you, I spent time overseas, where I would argue that in Indonesia, housing is actually more affordable, or you have an option to buy more
Yes,
affordable housing.
yes. Compared to some
exactly, and
Even
mortgages
in
can
Southeast
be a lot
Asia
shorter.
region.
Yeah, very
Right.
much so. And I think that a lot of people are a little bit blind as to where do I start looking? Because when you purchase a home, the first thing you do is start looking. And there you have prices.
Yeah.
But I think what you mentioned, Ilya, is maybe start a step back prior to that. Maybe measure your capacity first before you start looking for homes. So you co-founded a startup that actually focuses in helping potential homeowners who are kind of blind to finding the right type of mortgage. So tell us before we talk about Ringkas, what prompted you to build this startup, and what problems are you actually trying to solve?
Yeah, so I think this company is fairly new. We started about a year ago, and I think when we looked at the market, we analyzed the market, and we saw, as I said, few indications like the mortgage penetration is being extremely low. We're seeing the complexity of the whole process, and sometimes misinformation.
Yeah.
People are getting misinformed of what they can really get approved or not. So we thought, I think and so many stakeholders, right? As you mentioned before,
Yes.
right? You have the property developer, you have the customer, you have the bank,
Bank.
and have the agent, and appraiser. How do you manage all
Everyone
that?
working
right?
together.
So I think our motivation was obviously, first of all, impact story, because we wanted to deliver more impact for the country and make sure that people can buy more homes and that mortgage penetration ratio can go up.
Sure.
But secondly, we thought that through technology you can digitize that end-to-end ecosystem and get all the people on board on the same page, right? So I think that is, so my background is mainly in tech, and that's where I thought that, by putting a little bit of technology, eliminating some paperwork, you can really help customers to get approved faster, better, and that was our main motivation to start the company.
Oh, so what is the app provide? Like a lending or you working with banks and the lenders as well?
Yeah, so I think the main idea is that we work with the largest banks in Indonesia on one hand, and on the other hand, we work with, at the moment, mainly with the large property developers.
Okay.
So, and at the moment, traditionally, if you want to apply for a mortgage, as I said, there's the capacity problem. You don't know what you can afford, etc. So the first thing that our technology does is allows you to do in real time your capacity checking.
Okay.
So just by scanning your KTP and national IDs, and you basically
Like a credit check, basically.
you can see immediately your credit check, and then you can see if you can qualify or not for a loan, right? So we call it pre-qualification.
Okay.
Okay.
Which exists in many countries, but traditionally in Indonesia it takes some
Yes.
time and doesn't really exist. So that's really number one. And number two, we allow customers to fill in one application form, and with one application form apply to immediately multiple banks.
Okay.
Because traditionally now you need to apply a paper form for each bank.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And those
So
columns are
many,
really
so
tiny.
thick.
I'm trying to wrap
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. High school,
I
back
miss
in
I'm thick.
Yeah, but imagine doing it like for 2 or 3 banks.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
that's
Very
extremely
tiring.
hassle.
I did it
Yeah.
3 times, by the way, in 1 month, and basically it was all the same information, but I had to rewrite everything in original form. So it
Correct.
would have been great to know if I could have done this.
Okay.
So we're allowing you to do it with one form and then apply for multiple banks. In this
Okay.
case, maximizing the chances of get approved for a mortgage and maximizing the chance of getting the best deal, right?
Okay.
Because now you have several banks.
Sure. And everyone has different programs. And
Everyone
any
has
given
different
time of the year.
programs, but then you can get the offers and then you compare. So
Okay.
that's the number 2 thing we do. And number 3 thing we do it, which is very important, we really connect digitally to the banks. So the applications are not anymore manually,
Okay.
but the banks receive them in a digital format,
Okay.
right? So you don't anymore need to print all the documents, the
Yeah.
paper,
Yeah.
get a motorbike, drive to the local
Yeah.
chabank and
Right.
print the
Time.
Trying to
documents.
get there before 3 p.m. before the bank closes.
And the queue.
Yeah, but is this specifically for private? Do you work with both state-owned and private banks as well?
For sure, we work with banks like Mandiri,
Okay.
which is state-owned, but we also work with all the major private banks as well. So we really try to cover end to end.
All right, so what
Wow.
are, apart from obviously convenience and efficiency, how can you help a potential homeowner increase their chances of approval? How does Rinkas help do that?
Yeah, so I think that the main thing, as I said, in this pre-qualification process, what we tell the customer immediately, whether he can be approved for that particular asset or not. If not, then we basically advise him to choose a cheaper house.
Okay.
So
Right,
say, for that cheaper house, you have a better option. That's number 1. Number 2, we also advise him that, look, for certain banks have certain, I would say, risk appetite, and certain customers have certain risk profile, right? So
Okay.
we also tend to make those risk profiles, risk appetites to make sure that the customer has the maximum chances to get
Yeah.
approved,
Okay.
right? So that's basically the magic is in the back.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
that makes a
basically
lot of
they're personalizing the, someone who
matchmaking
wants to
basically.
Matchmaking,
Client and
matchmaking,
bank,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
Right.
Never thought about that.
No.
There's an app for that? Wow.
Well, it would certainly save a lot of time because
Of
I
course.
ended up, I'll just share one last experience is the first bank I applied for,
Yeah.
they had a specific kind of program that I was very interested in.
Yeah.
It suits what I wanted to
Yeah.
do with my mortgage. But I found out later after filling out those tiny applications that, oh, my particular line of work, it wasn't a matter of qualification from the amount of money,
Yeah.
but it was like, oh, your type of work doesn't actually qualify for this program. And that was in
Oh, I
really fine
see.
print that we didn't, I wasn't
okay.
identified in the beginning. It would have saved me a week's
Yeah,
of time
yeah,
at
yeah.
least. So
Ah.
yeah, that would have certainly helped. So a lot of government
Cool.
really wants the millennials all the way to Gen Zers to really
Yeah.
purchase homes. But again, apart from knowing your capacity, do you have any advice for young families out there who are looking to buy a home?
For sure, I think it's the idea is to start saving early.
Yeah.
That's
right?
the key.
Because
So true.
even though central bank says that by law they basically require 0% down payment, the banks still have a down payment that you need to make when you're applying for a mortgage.
Yes.
Right. So
What is that usually, like 5% minimum?
usually for the first house is 5% minimum, so it's still fairly affordable.
Yes.
But you still depends
Still
on
have to have
yeah, you still have to have something, right?
Yeah.
So I think Indonesians tend to love consume a lot, and the
Yeah.
savings part is not.
So many distractions.
Yeah, so I think the idea is to really think about that they're going to get married, think about starting savings, start saving for a house. So one of the things we'll be also launching next year is a KPR program where they can
Ooh.
start understanding how much they need to save every month.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
So I
nice.
think,
Makes it easier.
yeah, I think I would recommend that for sure.
Okay.
Nice.
And, one more thing.
I
that
was about to ask that
Yeah, go
about the
ahead, yeah.
KPR because do you have any program for the KPR? He said it.
Yeah.
For the next year.
And we
Amazing,
in
right?
Indonesia are lucky
Yeah.
enough. A lot of Indonesians still are able to live with their family or in their
Yeah,
family home, so
yeah.
that you can use that as an opportunity to save up even after you just get married.
Of course,
Buy your
of
first home
course.
as well.
But since now we know there's an app to make the processes more easier, so why not? We save early and then we can purchase our first home.
Yes,
Amazing.
indeed, and perhaps more after that. Ilya, thank you
Yes.
so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Rinkas obviously will be helping and continue to help
Yeah,
streamline
such a breakthrough.
this process for
Amazing.
young potential homeowners. So
Nice.
we hope that you out there have found this insightful, and if perhaps are looking for a new home, that
Yeah.
you found this informative enough to help you out in your journey. Thank you, Ilya, for your time.
Thank you so
Joining
much.
us.